After the winter pause that TNA seems to go through every single year, this week's episode of TNA Impact helped build out the card for Genesis. In this episode of TNA Impact, we did get 3 wrestling matches and 8 talking-related segments, whether it be backstage interviews, promos, or backstage segments, but did it do enough to build the momentum for Genesis? Let's get right into it. Starting things off, we got a promo from Joe Hendry coming out to the ring. The Atlanta crowd was hot for him. There were multiple different chants while he was talking. That's one of the things that's made Joe Hendry so unique and such a standout. He has a very unique sort of charisma, but his ability to connect with an audience and get them to rally behind him is absolutely one of the key elements that has made him the star that he has become and he will become in the future. He's had a fantastic 2024, and he's already starting things off with a bang in 2025, especially with this upcoming world title match with Nic Nemeth at Genesis. Now, he did say that Final Resolution was a promise that he kept to himself by becoming the #1 contender, and he will end up becoming champion. He said that Genesis is all about new beginnings, and it will be the beginning of the Joe Hendry era. Before Joe can finish, though, Ryan Nemeth interrupts him, and before Ryan Nemeth can even say anything, the Atlanta crowd has the absolute opposite effect that they had when Joe Hendry came out by chanting "You suck" before he could even say anything. Now, I couldn't agree with the Atlanta crowd more here, but it did seem like a natural fit in where Ryan Nemeth is obviously the brother of Nic Nemeth, and it generating some disdain and annoyance from anybody watching, especially in the live audience. Because when you see Ryan Nemeth appear, what else do you do other than get annoyed? But Ryan Nemeth states that Nic Nemeth will not be happy about what Joe Hendry has to say, and he calls Joe a mid-carder. Joe ends up replying and saying, if he's a mid-carder, then Ryan Nemeth is a janitor, which was really funny. They go back and forth, and this leads to a match between Ryan Nemeth and Rhino, which I know this is one of Rhino's final matches. His final match with TNA will be next week. We'll get into more of that later. This felt really random, and I'm going to be honest with you, in regards to my notes for Ryan Nemeth versus Rhino, I have one note, and it says, Ryan Nemeth wins via DQ after Rhino hits him with a chair. So when I only have one bullet point and it's the result or how the match ends, I know that I was not checked into the match at all. I was bored, and there's really no talking points when it comes to this match. Very skippable. I hate to say that. And the fact that, Rhino has done a lot for TNA, the fact that his second to last match is with Ryan Nemeth in a one-on-one and it ends in a DQ. Next. Jordynne Grace is then interviewed backstage by Gia Miller. Jordynne highlights the fact that Tessa Blanchard took her ball and left, but now is calling TNA hers and wants to reap the benefits of Jordynne's hard work. Jordynne has put TNA on her back and has been a true representative of the company through her entire tenure with TNA. She has represented the company and built it up, and she stated that she is not the same Jordynne from 5 years ago, but she does in fact know that Tessa is the same exact Tessa from 5 years ago, which the realness incorporated in these promos and in these segments between Jordynne and Tessa, I think, are going to be what makes this work. It's hard to tell if she really feels that way or not, and it's easy to assume that she does based on all the backstage rumors and gossip and things that have happened around Tessa Blanchard over the years. But that realness and that intensity that Jordynne provides, and Tessa provides it as well, makes this work really, really well in terms of it being entertaining talking segments and entertaining wrestling when they end up eventually having a match. We then move over to the Rascalz having a promo. They say they're blazing their own trail, and they feel that now after Final Resolution, the tag titles are being held by Legends with the Hardys, but after their win at Final Resolution, they feel that they want to face the Hardys for the titles. They are ready for that. The Hardys end up appearing backstage, talking alongside them, and they state the Rascalz remind them a lot of themselves, and they end up setting a match for the TNA World Tag Titles at Genesis. I was very happy about this, that Rascalz, especially after winning at Final Resolution and being one of the only tag teams that seems to have any momentum, especially with ABC being out of the picture with Chris Bay's current injury, it just feels like a natural fit and an obvious fit that the Rascalz would be going for the tag titles at this time. I hope this ends up becoming like a whole program, though. We don't just get a match at Genesis and that's it. I hope this ends up becoming like a long-scale feud. between the two, because I think they could produce some really awesome matches, and hopefully by the end of it resulting in the Rascalz being the new tag champions. But I'm excited to see how their match at Genesis unfolds. I really do hope, though, that it is the start of a long-term rivalry between the two. Kushida going up against Ace Austin made me so happy here, because I know this is one of Kushida's final matches currently with TNA, as he's no longer with the company, but he finished out these tapings. And seeing him go up against Ace Austin, I feel like was the perfect utilization of him. This is something that I talked about in my Final Resolution review and my TNA Departures review. So if you haven't checked that out, check it out up here. But utilizing talent when you know that they're leaving to put over other talent or to strengthen other talent is something that TNA hasn't always done great. But I was really hoping that they would do something with Kushida and help building up some of the other members of the X Division, because as I've talked about in my previous videos, the X Division right now, there's really not anybody believable that can beat Moose. Ace Austin is one of the guys I would say that is closest. Leon Slater is another one that they need to really build up. He could eventually dethrone Moose. But Kushida and Ace Austin had a really good match here. Ace Austin at one point went to go do like a handstand on the apron, a one-armed handstand, and Kushida like rips his arm out from under him. That was a great spot. I really, really liked that. At one point, I was like, holy shit, like the way Ace Austin hit his shoulder, it was like, that looked rough. But he ends up being fine. And Ace Austin ends up hitting a one-armed gut-wrench powerbomb at one point. That looked really cool and showed Ace Austin's like strength and intensity that I think he embodies like in every single match, along with his speed, which makes him such a natural fit for the X Division. The top rope armbar from Kushida was great as well, and Ace Austin does end up securing the win with the fold. Very happy that Ace won here. Again, putting Kushida in a match against a talent like Ace Austin, having him go over was great. It gives Ace Austin a little bit of momentum, and I was happy just with this, but then Ace Austin ends up cutting a promo in ring after their match and ends up thanking the fans for supporting him in Chris Bay's absence. He thanks the fans for supporting Chris Bay during this time of injury. And he states that Chris Bay did tell Ace Austin that he wants him to go on the craziest singles run for him now that he's out of action and finally win the big one, meaning the TNA World title. Ace Austin says it's time for him to become the top guy with the top title and kind of calls out Nic Nemeth in a way. Moose ends up interrupting and coming out to the ring, saying he's offended that Ace Austin mentions the top title, but then did not mention his name. States that the X Division is the flagship division of TNA, and without the X Division, TNA would not be TNA. And without Moose, TNA wouldn't be the hottest company right now. And it tells Ace Austin that he is scared of him, so he should go after Nic Nemeth, which obviously starts arguments between the two. Moose went to go say something about Chris Bay, but then Ace Austin cuts him off and calls him a disrespectful piece of shit. Ace Austin did tell Moose that he could become a 4-time X Division champion very easily, which then triggers Santino to come out, the director of Authority. He appreciates both talents, he states, for having heart and having passion. He says Moose is a top guy and Ace Austin is on fire currently, especially after this win against Kushida, and is definitely the number one contender. So he makes a match for Genesis between Moose and Ace Austin for the X Division title at Genesis. So already with this episode, we go from having the world title match at Genesis to now having the tag title match and the X Division title match, which made me really happy. This was well done. Again, Kushida putting over Ace Austin getting that emotional in-ring promo, talking about his tag partner and talking about where it leaves him and what his goals are currently until Chris Bay comes back. And then Moose interrupt. All of this was really, really well done. I really liked this segment. It set up the X Division title match in a way that felt natural. But I'm excited to see how it pans out. I don't think that Ace Austin will end up winning this, which could give Moose a really good win under his belt in title defense. But if Ace Austin doesn't end up beating him at Genesis, I hope they continue to build Leon Slater or start building Leon Slater. I said continued, but they need to start building him. To inevitably, hopefully, end up dethroning Moose. And I hope they build up some other X Division stars as well, but we'll see. EY and Maclin have a backstage segment together. Maclin says he's pissed off about losing a Final Resolution, and EY lets Maclin know that he supports him and believes in him. Jonathan Gresham ends up showing up and saying that he's also pissed off, and the system walks by trying to figure out how they can get their tag titles back, and then they get attacked by Maclin and EY. That's pretty much all we got. Kind of random, kind of interesting, kind of odd, kind of don't know where it's going, kind of don't care, kind of want to. Yeah. Anyway, we get to see Ryan Nemeth once again. So exciting. He is getting seen by the doctor backstage. He said it hurts everywhere because Rhino hit him with a steel chair and goes on to make fun of Rhino. Nic Nemeth visits him and Ryan tells him everything that happened previously in the show. And Rhino comes in to argue, which then triggers Santino to appear once again. And he makes a match between Rhino, Joe Hendry, and the Nemeth brothers. So it'll be Nick and Ryan versus Rhino and Joe Hendry next week in a tag match on Impact. This is better than Rhino going out in a one-on-one match against Ryan Nemeth and losing DQ. I have to imagine Rhino's going to be the one to take the pin. I mean, unless Ryan Nemeth takes the pin. Actually, yeah, Ryan Nemeth should take the pin here, especially being Rhino's last match. Ryan does not need... Anyway, we'll see. Rhino, I don't want Rhino to take the pin and leave TNA. He's done a lot for the company. And yeah, I don't know. Oh, but maybe. It could go either way. I just really want Ryan Nemeth to lose. Okay. Then next we get Mike Santana's in-ring promo. Now, I am going out to say that Mike Santana is the MVP of this episode. And we'll get into it with this, but he is the MVP of this episode in my eyes. He comes out with Josh Alexander's headgear. He says he wants to talk about how he feels after what happened at Final Resolution, which obviously he lost. Josh Alexander zip-tied him to the barricade while cutting his promo in the ring and talking to the fans. A fan yelled, "I love you, Santana," which people were talking about online. It was so funny, and it gets a reaction out of Santana. He says fans expect him to be disappointed and pissed off after what happened at Final Resolution, which he is, but obstacles are something that he is used to, and it's a trend in his life, whether it was life on the street, his experience with rehab, or betting on himself when everyone said he was committing career suicide when he left AEW to come to TNA and focus on a singles run, and he's beaten it all so far. Getting back to the path of purpose is something that's important to him, and becoming the standard of TNA is something that he has his eyes set on. Now, the passion in this promo from Santana is something that I was really excited to see. I feel like he hasn't gotten enough time to have this type of promo and to, talk about his experiences or, briefly mention his experiences with rehab and this whole revitalization that he's had, not only in his career, but in his personal life. He seems to be in a much better place, and he's somebody that TNA has been putting stock into since his return, and I'm so happy to see that. But I think we needed a moment like this with him, and I'm glad that we got it. The Northern Armory ends up coming out, though. Josh Alexander says that so many say they want to be the guy just as Santana has, but so few rise to the occasion and end up obtaining it or being worthy of it. He says Mike is talented and tough and has heart. He says that he would not be the man today if it weren't for the battles that the North had with LAX. He says the North sent LAX packing, however, and the North became the longest reigning tag champs. However, after LAX was sent packing and the North did their whole thing, and Josh Alexander has had this amazing run as a singles competitor since Ethan Page left, Mike Santana went on to AEW to do nothing and has won 0 championships since leaving TNA. Josh says that he never wanted to be the guy for him. It just happened, and it was destiny. And for the right person, that's exactly how it happens. It just happens in his destiny. He says he lost the title after beating Christian before he could even put the title around his waist. But he went on to beat Minoru Suzuki and Bronson Reed and beat guy after guy to then become the standard. Josh says he speaks from the heart when he says as long as he is in TNA, Santana will never be the guy. All this made me do is just hope that TNA somehow finds a way to keep Josh Alexander, even though I highly doubt it will happen. And if I had to bet on it, I would bet that it's probably not going to happen. But man, Josh and Santana are going to have some fun matches upcoming. Santana ends up saying that Josh might be right, that he left and did nothing while Josh ended up doing everything. He says, but was it because he was sucking up and kissing the ass of the man with the pencil, meaning Scott D'Amore, as Scott D'Amore and Josh Alexander had a very close relationship. He says he could whoop the entire Northern Armory's ass and states that he wants to face the Northern Armory next week. We then move over to a backstage segment with Kazarian. He says he knows everyone is buzzing about the world title match that will take place at Genesis, but he doesn't give a damn, but he will be watching and plotting, aka he does give a damn. He calls over Leon Slater, who happens to be near him backstage, and lets Leon know that he feels he has it, and Leon lets him know that he appreciates it. But Kazarian lets Leon know that he will never be a king, but he could be a prince, and says he is willing to mentor Leon Slater. He asks Leon Slater to carry his trophy for him and watch him wrestle at ringside. Leon ends up declining and says he is not there to be a trophy boy, but here to create his own legacy and make a name for himself. He tells Leon to remember who paved that road for him, and Leon respects it, but he says he will end up passing Kazarian one day. JDC randomly appears, and he says Leon is a good little hand, but he's missing something. Kind of random. I know JDC defeated Leon Slater for whatever reason at Final Resolution in the pre-show. Felt kind of random, but we'll see where this goes. Nic Nemeth ends up coming to the ramp to cut a promo. There were a bunch of "we believe" chants, again, further emphasis and further evidence of Joe Hendry's impact and, impact. Joe Hendry's connectivity with the audience. Nic Nemeth says that he believes in Joe Hendry as well. At Bound for Glory, they beat the hell out of each other. He was this close to becoming TNA World Champion, but he's still Nic Nemeth, and he kind of was just talking himself up and being an egomaniac in that moment, which got a reaction out of the crowd. There were people laughing. He is blown away by everything Joe has done and is proud of him. He states one of the greater honors of his life, though, has been able to represent TNA and the locker room that they currently have as the TNA World Champion. This leads to the fans chanting, "You deserve it," to Nic Nemeth. And Nic Nemeth says that the locker room appreciates all the fans' support. He states that Genesis will be a special night. Ryan Nemeth then comes out and says Joe Hendry is not Nick's friend, and he will stab him in the back as soon as he can. Will Nick turn heel next week is kind of where I kind of question things. And this now makes me think of the tag match, and I wonder if there'll be some dirty tactics to end up defeating Joe Hendry and Rhino. Having Rhino take the pin, it would make sense. But of course, I would love to see Ryan Nemeth end up eating the pin just because. But Nick ends up telling Ryan that the reason they are in the tag match next week is because of him, and tells him to settle down. So I do think that, Nick's trying to play this middle ground role. He's been a really good representative for TNA through his entire run, whether it be in media and interviews and just in his matches and the way he's carried himself as world champion and the way he's carried himself since he came into the company at Hard to Kill. But I do sense something changing, and the fans are definitely behind Joe Hendry more than they are Nic Nemeth. So I think we'll end up seeing Nick go to the darker side and make more of a heel turn. But right now he's just playing this even ground. I think it's a tactic. We'll see how things develop. Lastly, we had the main event, which was an 8 knockouts tag team match. We had Jordynne Grace, Masha Slamovich, and Spitfire versus Ash and Heather by Elegance, Tasha Steelz, and Rosemary. Before the match starts, a security guard that Santino had directed to watch the entrance is seen on the ground backstage as somebody has attacked him. It obviously ended up being Tessa Blanchard. But we go into the match. I really thought it was funny. There was a funny moment where Tasha Steelz makes her entrance, and Ash by Elegance is doing her own version of Tasha's dance, which made me laugh. There were some great team moves from Jordynne and Masha on Rosemary. There was a double sidewalk slam that they did, and then was a moment where Jordynne had Masha in an electric chair type position and slams Masha on top of Rosemary. Those were really cool to see. All 8 women start throwing hands at one point, and then the faces end up suplexing the heels, which was a nice spot. Masha and Jordynne end up holding the ropes so Spitfire, Jody Threat, and Danny Luna can do suicide dives to the outside on the 4 other women, taking them all out. Heather by Elegance, she had a couple of moments in this match that were very brief, but all I could think to myself is whenever TNA ends up down the line, way down the line, because I think Heather and Ash will end up becoming TNA Knockouts tag team champions at some point, But whenever Heather inevitably goes on her own one day, I think she could end up being a really, really good, like a great star and a great talent for the Knockouts division. Everything just looks really good when she does it. Like the tilt-a-whirl DDT that she hit in this match, it just flowed. It was quick. Like she's just had a bunch of different moments so far since she's come into TNA where there's like brief moments and she hasn't been necessarily at the forefront like Ash by Elegance has. But I think down the line, we're going to see some really good stuff from her. Masha ends up pinning Tasha to win for her team. She hit the Requiem on Tasha just as she did at Final Resolution, securing the win for the faces. Tessa Blanchard ends up attacking Jordynne Grace. Heather and Ash by Elegance take out Spitfire. There's a weird moment where Masha's kind of standing there for a period of time and doesn't help or do anything, but Rosemary ends up taking her to the outside and misting her in the face. Tessa makes everything look so real and intense, and this is what I was saying earlier with Jordynne Grace. The two of them are definitely going to put on a match that we're going to talk about for a really long time. I feel like if, everything goes smooth and they can keep things at bay in terms of their rivalry outside of the ring. She ends up choking Jordynne out and dragging her down the ramp, throwing her outside of the building. Tessa ends up closing the door and saying it's her division and tells Jordynne to never come back. And then we get a cut back to the ring, and Ash and Heather by Elegance are seen holding the Knockouts tag titles to end out the show. Overall, the main event, I think the faces got good time. I think if it weren't for Tessa coming in for the attack and that moment of Ash and Heather with the tag titles, I would feel like the heels just kind of like match-wise just made the faces look really good, but then didn't get to really do much in the match, in my opinion. But obviously we got some building here to Tessa and Jordynne, which will end up inevitably happening at Genesis, but it has not been made official just yet. And then I think we'll see Spitfire versus Ash and Heather by Elegance at Genesis as well for the Knockouts tag titles. So this show, it did a really good job of building out the card. And I think they did a great job with the TNA tag titles, the X Division title match at Genesis now. There's the seeds planted for Tessa versus Jordynne and the Knockouts tag titles. My only gripe about this, honestly, the entire thing is just the amount of time we had to see Ryan Nemeth. I think it was just too much. And maybe some of the matches could have got a little bit more time, especially with how much promo and talking we got on this show, which I wasn't mad at. I think promos and talking and shit talking and all that stuff obviously is very important to build out a story and build out a card, especially a card that only had one match on it before this episode. So I think it was a good episode overall. There were just a couple hang-ups, but nothing that was like awful. I guess my only other hang-up is the matches that we ended up getting. Rhino and Ryan versus Ryan Nemeth was not a good match. Very skippable. The Knockouts tag match was solid. And then Ace Austin versus Kushida was a good match. Like that was definitely a really good match. Going back to Mike Santana being MVP, I just think he stood out. He really solidified the fact that like he's been fantastic in the ring forever now. But especially this run back, he's done a phenomenal job when it comes to his matches and his performances in those matches. The fans are rallying behind him more and more each week, I feel, especially as we get more out of him. But this in-ring promo, I think it showed that he, can hang with the main eventers when it comes to that talking piece and that character piece. And using his real-life backstory, I think, is brilliant here. It allows for further connectivity, and I think that trend will continue down the line. So I'm excited to see where things go. I'm excited to see Santana hopefully win the world title at Slammiversary in New York is my prediction. I'm going to be attending that show, so I'm also hoping to see that happen live for selfish reasons. But good show overall, and I'm interested to see how next week pans out and see if the momentum can continue to build towards Genesis. Let me know in the comments down below, what did you think of this episode, and are you excited for Genesis? What would you like to see added to the card? If you're not subscribed to the YouTube channel yet, make sure you hit that subscribe button, join our community. We would love to have you. Hit that like button. It really helps out this video, and I greatly appreciate it. And I will see you at the next one. Thank you for your support.